Carolina was, well, just in about the same position as New Orleans and Atlanta were in 2022. And yeah, competing for that crappy NFC South division title. Well, why is that? Well, in 2022, going in, there weren't really a lot of expectations for them, especially considering that their micromanaging head coach, Matt Rule, was still stinking up the joint. And he made another bad decision by trading for Baker Mayfield when he already had Sam Darnold on the team. So keep in mind, though, that Sam Darnold was injured. He wasn't ready to play, so they got Baker Mayfield. So just keep that in mind, though. And yeah, that decision went poorly because they started the season 1-4 because of Matt Rule, the Fool's coaching, and Baker Mayfield's poor play. Yeah, consider that. So they got rid of Matt Rule, the Fool. They fired him after losing to the 49ers. And then Baker Mayfield eventually would get waived deep into the season. And he actually got benched prior to that. So with both of those things in mind, now that Steve Wilks, their defensive passing game coordinator, stepped in as the interim head coach, the Panthers would actually win enough games to keep them within reach of that NFC South crown. Yes, that crappy one. They won enough games thanks to their defense and a decent running back committee. Yeah, to keep pace with the struggling Tampa Bay Bucks. So now, late in the season, you do get Sam Darnold back. I mean, he's not terrible, outright terrible, but he's also not great. But at least what he did do was at least kind of protect the football. That's something that PJ Walker and Baker Mayfield couldn't do. So the Panthers, they get into the point of this de facto NFC title game late in the season on New Year's Day against the Tampa Bay Bucks. They actually were on the verge of winning that, and then they blew their chance, and they get eliminated from contention. Yeah, with literally 2 weeks left in the season. So overall, not really exactly a good season for Carolina, but I'd say you almost made it. You almost made it, I guess. So yeah, you ended your season 7-10, but it's clear as day that you really need some work still. You really need some work for the Panthers. So looking at their offseason, what I prioritized for them is that, because they won so many games, they were now down to the 9th overall pick in the draft. Even then, they still had to get a quarterback. The question was, would their quarterback be there by that point? So it was going to be an interesting choice for them. Do they find a way to get that quarterback at 9, hopefully that they would slide down there, or do they make a big move to go up some in the draft? And then they have to retool the offensive line because it wasn't exactly great in 2023. 2023. We're going way far ahead. 2022. Because, whether it's Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, or Sam Darnold, not great. They also had to find a running back to replace Christian McCaffrey because, they traded him midseason to the 49ers, and they had to go by committee, and the committee was fine, but it became less sustainable in the final weeks of the season. So, yeah, not very too reliable there. So, once the offseason came around, they managed to find a permanent head coach by the name of Frank Reich. He was unjustly fired from the Indianapolis Colts early in the season for Jeff Saturday. Yes, Jeff Saturday, ladies and gentlemen, that disaster. And fortunately, Frank Reich escaped that disaster to become the Panthers head coach. But we'll see how this works out. So the Panthers then made the big move of the offseason, one of them at least, by trading for the Chicago Bears' first overall pick in the draft in return for their 9th pick. And they also gave away receiver DJ Moore, along with more draft picks. So probably the biggest move in this, probably the biggest piece in this move was giving away DJ Moore. It's kind of a fair compromise, but at the same time, it's wow, they really gave away their top receiver. And now whoever's going to be the quarterback, it's who am I going to throw to? But fortunately for Carolina, they kind of rectified this in their free agency. So looking at who they lost first, honestly, not too many. They didn't really lose too many players of note. I mean, you did lose DJ Moore in that trade. So, yeah, that was a big loss. They also lost backup quarterback Sam Darnold, but you could live without him. They also lost linebacker Corey Littleton to the Houston Texans. I mean, you can find another replacement for him anyway. Look at the players that they re-signed. Kicker Eddie Pinheiro, surprisingly very reliable for them throughout the season. So he was also very clutch for them too, surprisingly. Center Bradley Bozeman on the offensive line. Guard Michael Jordan. Yes, Michael Jordan, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm kidding. Not the basketball player. And looking at some of their free agency moves, that's when they decided to go big. They signed Miles Sanders away from the Philadelphia Eagles. He could be a big addition to their backfield. I wouldn't say Christian McCaffrey replacement, but it's still a big move. He had a big 2022 in key part of that Eagles' deadly offense. So perhaps he provides something of value for the Carolina Panthers run game. I do think that they still could use another running back, though. They also got Adam Thielen from the Minnesota Vikings when he got released. DJ Chark from the Detroit Lions. So now you have two receivers to go along with your new quarterback. So hey, at least they replenished there. Tight end Hayden Hurst from the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think it is a decent move there. And then an interesting one. Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton from the New Orleans Saints. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the mediocre quarterback, Andy Dalton. And Panthers fans were like, really? Andy Dalton? It's like we had to suffer to Andy Dalton. But don't fret about that yet. Safety Von Bell from the Cincinnati Bengals. So a big add to that strong defense from last year. And then that's when the Panthers really got to work in the NFL draft. Because with the number 1 overall pick that they traded for, they got their potential franchise quarterback. They got their potential guy that they wanted. And that was from Alabama, Bryce Young. So I talked about Bryce Young in my scouting report. I liked a lot what he presented. He was fast. He was very smart with the football. He had a good deep ball throw. My only question was his size. He was not very short, but he's not like exactly tall either. So there's a lot of size concerns I had with Bryce Young, but I thought he could overcome that here in Carolina, but that remains to be seen. So now obviously your goal for Carolina is to continue to get him support. And that's exactly what he did. They did, at least. They got another receiver by the name of John Domingo from Ole Miss, an edge rusher on the defensive side, DJ Johnson from Oregon, and then they beefed up a little on the offensive line, Chandler Zavala from North Carolina State, and then with their last move, safety Jamie Robinson from Florida State. So obviously, one of your goals for 2023 is to perhaps maybe get Bryce Young in as starter by midseason, but who knows if he'll be ready by then. Maybe you'll still have Andy Dalton as your starter. I don't know. It all depends on how things go by training camp, I say. How training camp goes, how preseason goes. We'll see if Bryce Young is ready to go. But the big takeaway I saw from this Panthers offseason is that they have an opportunity to not just rebuild, but contend at the same time. Because they with all these signings, they have an opportunity to do both. It's kind of weird to say. Because, first and foremost, they're in a crappy NFC South division. So not only do they have a quarterback, not only do they now have the support around him to help him out, they can compete too. And that all depends on how well he plays. So there's a very real chance that, sure, Bryce Young will have his struggles, but there's also a real chance that the rest of the division struggles too. And that could open the door for Carolina to go and grab that division title, even with the losing record. So looking at their key division games in 2023, I'd say for now, it's just the first game, the first home game against New Orleans, because you want to see if it's going to be Bryce Young starting. You have to find out how he can handle the pressure at home against potentially a good or maybe solid defense in New Orleans. You also want to see how that defense performs against Derek Carr on the road. So, yeah, that first game at home in week 2 against New Orleans Saints, It's going to be vital. It really is going to be vital. So I guess the biggest question that I have for the Carolina Panthers going to 2023, obviously it's the first one is, when does Frank Reich get the keys to Bryce Young? Like, is he going to be impressed enough with preseason and training camp, like with how well Bryce Young, or maybe not Bryce Young, is, that he starts right away? We shall see. It's going to be a battle between Young and Andy Dalton. Can Bryce Young impress enough to supplant Andy Dalton as the starter? Or are we going to have to go through a couple games with Andy Dalton struggling so midly that Frank Reich is eventually going to have to put in Bryce Young as the starter? And then who's going to be that top receiving option? Who's going to be Bryce Young's preferred go-to guy? And yeah, I say this because, the Panthers did their due diligence at the receiving position. Now they just have to figure out who's going to be that preferred option for him. Is it going to be Adam Thielen, DJ Clark, Anthony Mingo, or Jonathan Mingo, or sorry, I'm trying to remember names here. Who's going to be that number one guy for Bryce Young? Or maybe they won't be. I don't know. So the Panthers, they had themselves a very solid offseason, reshaping their offense and, getting a couple of solid pieces on defense. And of course, they got that big move to get their potential franchise quarterback in Bryce Young from Alabama. Now they have to address the next step. How does it all come together on the field? They do have a very good shot to compete in a very putrid NFC South because, their schedule outside of a few teams is not that daunting, to be honest with you. And depending on how and when Frank Reich inserts Young, the Panthers can give them a really good shot in the arm of winning this NFC South. So maybe, again, like I said, even 8-9 might be enough to win this very poor division. But again, it's all going to depend on when Frank Reich, the head coach, gives Bryce Young the keys to the car, and maybe even the kitty for him to ride on as well.